I love telling people about the Knifewall. I've used the Knifewall for decades now, and I love it. It so improved my woodworking when I realized what I was really trying to do was establish a wall made with a knife that cross-cut fibres in preparation for joinery, where I would cut the shoulders, cut the dovetails down to the shoulder line. I wanted the most perfect, crisp, clean edge that I could ever get. And when people previously described the mark that I make with the knife as a marking knife or a marking, I didn't feel like it was enough. I saw more often than not that it bruised the wood. What I wanted to emphasize the importance of severing the fibers. So for me, the cross-grain cut that goes into the shoulder of a tenon is so critically important that I always use a knife because it's cross-grain. That means that the strands are going along the wood this way, along the long axis. So if this is a tree growing, the strands, these cells are growing upwards. They've got to be cut because they're a bit like rope, if you imagine them like rope. So if I was making a tenon onto this piece of wood like this, let's say I'm just going to rough out a tenon. This will give you an example of where I'm running my knife walls to. There's one side, shoulder lines all the way around. I don't have to go all the way around in this case, but just to give you an example, I would be taking off these two sides. They would be the cheeks. So in this case, this is where my knife wall comes in. I go right onto my cut line there, and I make a wall that goes across the grain like this with a super sharp knife. This is a Stanley folding pocket knife. It's one of the best knives I've ever used, if not the best. It's got a double-sided bevel, so when I'm pulling my knife across here, instead of going vertically, I slightly lean it to one side, and that gives me a vertical cut because I'm compensating for the bevel. That's so important. So 2 or 3 passes, however many you want, go into this corner here, go down to this one here, flip over and do the same from this face here. And what we've got is something that separated the surface fibers. So that's the knife wall. We go all the way around. I'd go on this face too. So what do I do now? I go into my vise. And this is where I make a very deliberate pass with the chisel here. So I'm going into that knife wall now. So you start seeing why it's called a knife wall now, because when I take away those fibers, I've got a very definitive step down, and in that step down is where I place the saw and just rub that saw tight up against the knife wall, and I get the crispness that I want, not only on the surface corner here, so I've got no tear out, 0 tear out here, but I get no tear. I got the tear out on the waste wood, but none on the good wood on this side. So that's perfect for me. That's the knife wall. That's what the knife wall gives me. So shoulder lines for tenons, shoulder lines for dovetails, it's the same thing. What I'm going to do now is take this piece of wood, and if I was making a dado, so this would be the bookcase joint, I place my piece of wood on, mark it with a pencil to get my rough lines. So let's go ahead and put a couple of lines on here. Put your second piece of wood on here. That's going to give you a rough mark for where this is going to go. So I've got my housing dado going here. However deep I want to go, let's say in this case we're going maybe 1/4 of an inch deep, something like that. So we make a line, and then we've got these pencil lines. Pencil lines are not very definitive. So we start off with the knife right on the first cut line, not the second one at this stage. We'll do that later. This goes here, a light pass and a pull. I've established a very shallow knife wall. Once I've got that, I go all the heavier, and now I can go as heavy as I like. Again, I've established the knife wall. Very important for me, because what does that mean? It gives me the accuracy I want. It gives me the precision I want to cut a perfect joint and to get the crispness between the two components. So now again, I can go down with my saw like this, right up against that knife wall and cut, or I can go on the bench top with my chisel hammer and I can chisel down in the knife wall, right up against that knife wall, and I get a really crisp, clean, sharp corner. Back in the vise for safety, and then I come in this way and muscle that in, or use your chisel hammer, chisel out that waste wood, and what I have is a beautiful, crisp, clean line. If it's not crisp, if I've moved off with my chisel, I can go back onto the knife wall, pop it with the hammer, and I've got the crispness that I want. Once I've done that, I go back in here, bring my knife right into the corner, almost as though I'm reaching underneath the corner. There's my exact position. Flip this so I can put the bevel on the waste wood. So my bevel from my knife is now on the waste wood. Pull the knife wall across here. Again, I've got that knife wall. Chisel into the surface fibre like this, angling my chisel, and I've got the exact position I want. Whether I saw or chop, I've now got my second knife wall in position, and I've got the exactness that I want. So that's my knife wall for those procedures there. But what about, I've got this long piece of wood, it's 7 feet long, and I only want 3'6", split it in two. What I'm going to do is go directly with a knife wall this time. So I go in here, and watch this. This is a trick that I've used throughout my working life. I pull the knife wall across, compensating for the bevel, so I have a perpendicular cut in the wood. And then watch what happens here. I'm going to move over what I think is close to the saw kerf, the thickness of my saw, with the teeth protruding each side. Pull the second wall. So I've got two walls there. I pull the second wall like that, over right onto that far corner, go into this side, like this. And I'm going to put that wall onto this side, or those walls, both of the walls. This is my cross-cut method. I don't have a chop saw. I don't use one actually, but you could use one. But this is the hand tool method for cross-cutting your piece of wood, getting the kind of crispness that you need. So these knife walls are not just guidelines for the saw and the chisel. They're the guideline also for other perfecting of the cut that you might want. So you can cut in between there. I'm just pulling a shooting board in because I use it as a bench hook to cross cut with. Now I take my saw and I'm right in between those two sections of wood. Now I've got my knife wall on either side, and these fibres just clear themselves out because that opening cut is removing the sawdust right in between. So I've dropped my hand here, I'm following the knife wall on the edge, and that now is guiding my knife cut, my saw cut on the other side as well. So now my 6-foot piece of wood is now 2 3-foot pieces of wood. Let's take a look at what we got. What we have is I've got a knife wall here. I've got a crisp, clean line, and I have a fraction of wood on the other side. I've got the same on this side, can you see? But what I don't have, I have no torn fibres, and that's important. No torn fibres and no torn fibres on this side. What's the next step? This is where I start to use those two knife walls that I can see on either side. I'm going to plane this end grain freehand like this. So I take my plane and I'm looking for the sole of the plane registering against the knife wall on this side. Let's see if I can show you. What I have is perfect. This is perfect alignment here. It's still inclined up to this side, so I have a little step down. Let me put this here. Now that this is out of the way, I come in from this side in a circular motion, an elongated elliptical movement like this. And I'm looking for my knife wall, a little bit more there. And what the knife wall has told me is that I'm dead square across, so I have no step down anymore. I take my square, I can check myself here. I've got dead square. So that's one way, and the other way is to bring in the shooting board again. If you want to use one of these, they're fine. They do help. I've got my knife wall on here, there, and I can cut to that. I can use my plane to trim this up, but I'm not actually using the shooting board to guide me so much as the knife wall. Just let me put a little bit more set on here. So I check myself to see how I'm doing. I'm right on my knife wall here, a little bit more maybe. Let me just set this a little bit deeper. But this is a wonderful way to make sure the ends of your shells are nice and straight and square. So there you have it. This is the term that I coined years ago, knife wall. Keep it with you. It's yours for the rest of your life. Use it for the accuracy. Use it because people will understand what you're talking about. It's a perfect term. Knife wall, it's yours now.